Look out, world. We are live. Gallivanting Man coming at you from the USA studio, home studio. We've returned from our sojourn. We've been in Mexico for most of the summer. My wife and I flew down to, where did we go first? We flew from San Francisco to San Jose del Cabo. San Jose del Cabo. We flew down there on the 28th of June, I believe. I think flights resumed from the US to the great country of Mexico in mid-June when the country of Mexico kind of reopened from COVID, state by state by state. 32 states in Mexico for those of us in the United States of America who have, much like myself, received very little education on the history of our neighboring country of Mexico, which I always, now that I'm an adult who has spent most of my adult life uh, or a lot of my adult life traveling to foreign countries, um, you see how really strange it is that we got real minimal or no education at all about the history of a country that neighbors ours. Not only does it neighbor our country, but we share a lot of the same history. I mean, you know, areas of the U.S. were obviously once Mexican territories, and boundaries have changed over the years. And I wrote a pretty long piece about the modern history of Mexico, which I posted up to my social media account. I will maybe somehow try to include it here in my YouTube channel because it was really interesting going, doing some research and going into the history books and finding out um, how this country, Mexico, came to be, how they were made sovereign, how they won independence from Spain, and then uh, created a constitution of their own and all that stuff. But that's a whole nother topic. What I really wanted to talk about today, and going live, this is really something totally unfamiliar to me. I'm really new just to making travel videos. So the fact that we're going unedited stream of consciousness is a little frightening and foreign to me. I don't know if anyone's participating in this. I haven't really advertised it too much. So if no one's listening, that's totally fine. This is going to be my dry run. If anyone is listening, I guess I will see. Send a comment. I really appreciate everybody's support. My videos went from having virtually no viewers to having about 10 to 20 to 50, so on and so forth. Now I've got a couple videos which have been viewed by the general public over 1,000 times, which is quite a monumental achievement for a guy like myself, a struggling technician trying to make some videos, travel videos. I have been traveling, like I said, since extensively, I'd say 2002. I took my first trip to Japan by myself. And this has spawned a life of independent travel. And this is really why I am putting this podcast together or these videos together because I want to promote independent travel. I want people to feel confident in their own ability to navigate the world without having to board a cruise ship or get on a tour bus with, other like-minded people. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. Go anywhere that you can, anywhere that you want, in any way that you wish. But what I've gotten out of life has been that traveling independently on your own free will, that is going, to places that are not always in the guidebook, staying at places that are not always listed on the internet even, but places that you come to learn about from fellow travelers and from like-minded people. And I'd like to consider myself one of those people. I think I've now become, over the years, a pretty good resource for those interested in traveling the world independently, moving about the world on your own free will, buying airplane tickets, putting all the logistics together. It's not an easy task. It's a lot of work, and there's a reason that there are travel agents and people who do this for a living, because they are good at it and they work hard. They spend a lot of hours doing research, and you want to try to get your money that you're going to spend, you want to try to make it last for as long as possible. You want to try to get as much value for what you're spending as possible, and you don't want to feel like you're foolishly wasting your money in places that you probably shouldn't be. And all that is going to be covered in upcoming podcasts and YouTube videos and my upcoming website, GallivantingMan.com, which will have my written stuff, which again is going back several decades now. Okay, so to recap and to get back to the beginning, I want to announce my gallivanting wife and I flew down to San Jose del Cabo. We rented a house for 3 weeks and lived much as locals. We really didn't do, typical tourist activities, renting 4x4s or going on glass bottom boat rides or, fishing expeditions or any of that stuff that people often do when they go to Cabo San Lucas or San Jose del Cabo. For those who are not familiar with the area of Baja Sur, the peninsula, the Baja Peninsula, is which borders the state of California and Arizona. It goes down. It's about 1,100 miles, so about the size of Florida. It's a big peninsula, if you can envision it that way. And it's divided into two states, Baja Norte and Baja Sur. So two independent states. And they kind of dealt with COVID differently because Baja Norte is bordering with the United States. They had, and there are bigger cities there, cities like Mexicali and Tijuana, which are much bigger cities or towns, whatever you want to call them, than anything in the southern area of the peninsula. San Jose del Cabo, Cabo San Lucas, and La Paz, which is, I believe, the capital of Baja Sur. So there were significantly more COVID cases up north than there were down south, but compared to what the United States has been suffering through, Mexico has really endured far less, despite what you probably are reading in the news. There were plenty of COVID cases throughout Mexico. I don't want to, sugarcoat it and say that there were not, but compared to what hit the United States, it was really quite much a fraction. And things were often safer in particular areas than other areas. So we felt very safe going to Baja. And in retrospect, it was a very wise decision. I feel like we really were able to make best of a very bad situation. And the very bad situation is COVID. And it is literally kept everyone at home or near their home, at least for months now. And it's impossible, I think, not to be really affected by that in some way, negatively, that is. People are definitely suffering from all sorts of depression issues and anxiety issues, and it's not to be taken lightly. These are issues which could have lingering effects on people, and something that I was very cognizant. I was very cognizant. I was very aware of. Can't get the words out. So when we were able to travel and buy flights to Mexico, it was, we got tested for COVID. Negative test results came back. So we felt okay about traveling. There were very, very few people on the flight. There were even less people, in the area. There were, I shouldn't say less people. There were not very many people in Cabo San Lucas or San Jose del Cabo when we got there. Even the main beach, I forget the name of it now, Madano Beach, I believe it is, or something like that, in Cabo San Lucas. I mean, I think in the end of June, I posted some photos up on social media, and there was maybe like 24 people on the entire beach, which I imagine often has thousands and thousands of people. The big hotels, the timeshares, the big developments that are along the beach in Cabo San Lucas were mainly shuttered. So there were some people that own second homes or their primary residences are now in Baja, expats that have moved down there, if not permanently, for the most of the year. So those people were still down there. But man, what an interesting time. There are no cruise ships. There's no people from Europe. There's no people from Asia, from South America. It was, just a few dozen people who arrived on these flights coming in from predominantly California, and Dallas, Texas, and the normal suspects who vacation down in Baja. Now, keep in mind, people have this conception, and we noticed it in Puerto Vallarta as well, since these towns were opened and made, available to tourism. People got a very mixed or bad. How should I do this nicely? They felt that they could behave as as any way they wished. They felt like they'd won freedom from their repressed area where they live or stay, and they didn't have to wear masks any longer in public. And that was a little alarming, but they were, for the most part, the minority element. When we were in Baja, everyone was very, very respectful of one another, wearing masks in public. They were maintaining a good social distance from one another. And I'm speaking about the locals in particular. And they were certainly very happy to see us. It was interesting because we were not really treated so much as tourists, because since there were so few tourists, I don't think they quite expected us to be there, and they questioned that we maybe were, in fact, expats or retired down there or living down there, like some others were. So that was an interesting experience to be. You still get hustled for the normal stuff that the salespeople get you. And man, it's intense in Baja, especially. We were in the supermarkets, and you get approached by very professional looking people in white button down collars. You would suspect that they worked for the supermarket, a big supermarket called La Comer, which is a giant, nice big supermarket, huge, operation. It's like a half Target, half Safeway, or whatever supermarkets in your town, but giant complex. And they're selling motorcycles and microwave ovens, and there's a pharmacy, there's a huge alcohol section. It's a big operation. And turns out, they'll start talking to you. Hey, is there anything we can help you with? And again, we're trying to keep a safe distance from people, so I'm not really soliciting much help. I can shop around the supermarket without much help at this point in my life. And they would continue to be very, very passive, in a very passive way, but still trying to befriend you. And then finally, it came to me: these people were selling timeshares, or they're trying to hook me into a timeshare deal. They're not here working for the supermarket at all, which is a very strange experience, because you don't expect to get hustled for timeshares while you're in the bread aisle. And so that was something new. But Mexico always has something new, and travel always brings something new to be learned, which is really why I do travel. And I said this in prior videos. I don't know if people have a similar mindset, but I will share mine with you. Is that basically people have the same. They want to get the same things out of life that I want, and people who are maybe watching this are trying to get. They wake up in the morning, they have breakfast, they go to work, and they come home, and they spend time with their family, and they repeat and rinse and do it again, same again the next day. And I say that because I often wonder what people think of when I tell them I'm going to Mexico. You would not believe the responses that I still get from very educated people who I would count as close friends. They think that, and I don't want to put thoughts in I shouldn't say they think, but I often get the impression that they view the entire country of Mexico as this Sonoran desert, with lots of cacti, and a lot of poverty and homelessness, and people shooting guns off in the streets, and white people getting raped and kidnapped. And it's a very strange phenomena what the media and what propaganda has done to the culture of Mexico and the country of Mexico in a whole. Those of us who have been to Mexico have probably a much different interpretation of the country. When I simply say Mexico, or I'm going to Mexico, it conjures up a thought in people's heads. Or Where are they going? Are they going to Cancun? Are they going to the beaches? Are they going to Mexico City? And what is Mexico City? I tell people that we were spending time in Mexico City, where where we had been living for a month, and it is met with uh, tremendous. What's the word? I don't know. Amazement. Like, why in the world would I choose to move to or live in Mexico City? And especially during these troubling times. 21 million people live in Mexico City. And just for a reference, and I've said this before, it's kind of like putting, the whole LA basin and combining it with New York City, and then you have this giant metropolis, because Mexico City is really many, many, many cities and towns and villages kind of all grouped in this large metropolis, formed into this large metropolis. So saying that COVID has hit Mexico City real hard, or there's a lot of crime in Mexico City, those could be accurate statements. And I'm not going to tell you that they're not, but I am going to tell you that what areas Mexico City has really been hit. I should ask you, what area of Mexico City has really been hit hard by COVID, or what areas of Mexico City do you find to be really dangerous? Because you can't call Mexico City and refer to it as one single entity. It is not. It's far from it. It's something that is so large and expansive that I don't think anyone in the U.S. who has not been there, or who has not been to maybe a place like Tokyo or even London, to a certain extent, because London is also that expansive and large. But Mexico City is the fourth largest, fifth largest populated city in the world. I believe it still is, as last I checked. So we've got Tokyo, Delhi, India, I believe Shanghai, China, no, Mexico City. Maybe, if I can't remember, there might be somewhere something like that. We'll have to look that up and post it later. But within those big boys up there, those are some big cities. For those of you who have traveled internationally, those are big cities. Mexico City's appear to those places. The culture runs real deep. The arts, the music, and I should have to mention the food. Wow, I just saw that Cocksparrow poster fall down behind me. Let's go address that before it falls down. Hang on one second, folks. All right, there we go. Most importantly, the food. There has been a flood of immigrants who have settled into Mexico City over the last 150, almost 200 years. No, 200 years now. So it has certainly seen the everlasting effects of these immigrants, people coming from places like Lebanon, where they brought the shawarma with them, which soon became a El Pastor tacos. So the African immigrants, the South American immigrants, the Asian immigrants coming from all over the world who have settled into Mexico City, has a female Jewish neighbor mayor right now. So you could see the amazing deep culture and diverse culture which has existed in that area of the world for several hundred years now. And it really has made Mexico City one of the most interesting places for anyone who has a thirst for world culture, travel, subcultures, all that stuff, like stuff that I travel the world for. The one elephant in the room that I want to address, and something that needs to be mentioned, because I get this question sent to me on every form of social media. People ask me this in person. It is without a doubt, the elephant in the room is it safe to go to Mexico? Do you feel safe in Mexico? Does your wife feel safe in Mexico? And my wife doesn't appear. She won't be appearing live on this video, but she is gallivanting wife, and she's equally involved in this travel that I am. We're not just a married couple that are, you know, moving around the world, and I'm calling all the shots. She's equally involved in all the decisions that we make about where we go and how we travel, and she certainly does feel safe everywhere that we've been. I think I can speak for her in that respect. But I will say that in going places, not just in Mexico City, but as a woman, she certainly does not feel safe often traveling, walking, or going about by herself. So when we do travel, we stick together, and safety is something that is always in the front of my mind. Um, I want to mention, if you do watch other people's travel videos, non-Americans, people who live in Europe, who live in South America, live in Asia, when safety is often brought up, the U.S. is not really setting the bar real high. So when I hear Americans asking me, "Is it safe to walk around Mexico City?" Well, safe compared to what? Safe to walk compared to Tokyo, Japan? Well, probably not. If you grew up in Japanese culture, if you grew up in a place like Tokyo or matter that I've been to at least, those are very safe, secure places that we do not enjoy that level of safe or safety or security here in this country. If you're from Canada, you have a different sense of safety and security than we do in the United States of America. And I'm not sure how different things really are between life in middle America than it would be in middle of Mexico. Now there are bad areas of Mexico that's going through terrible gang warfare, something that we probably don't see the same the likes of in the U.S. Now there were mafia wars that I was well aware of in New York growing up, but the numbers of fatalities are nothing compared to what happens in Mexico. Basically, what's happening right now in Mexico, and it has been going on for quite a long time, is what are called drug cartels are in fact drug cartels. They move tons of narcotics over the borders, but really they're just organized crime families, the same way the mafioso is in Italy or in the U.S. or in Canada, and they are infiltrating many different areas of life in Mexico, not just in the transportation and manufacture and sale of narcotics, but also in the building industry, in the construction, in typical areas that organized criminals get involved with. They are involved in there. Now, keep in mind that if you are growing up in rural Mexico, in southern, let's say southern Mexico, in some of the poorer areas of Guerrero or Chiapas, um, Oaxaca, southern agricultural areas, very, very poor places. The chances of prosperity or for a good job placement or a future of employment are not good. Your chance of survival in these areas are low. Your life expectancy is considerably lower. Your access to medical facilities is just not there, and so these people are often given the unfortunate chance of roll the dice and try to do better than your father did or your grandfather did, or come work for a drug or a criminal organization that will make sure your family gets taken care of, even if you don't survive the whole decade. We'll make sure that your family is well fed, your house is paid for, and the offer seems so ludicrous to those of us in other areas of the world that you and I would certainly not consider these offers because it's not worth it. Your chance of survival in these rackets are fractionally this much. you will literally end up dead or incarcerated, and probably incarcerated and then dead. Is mostly the way these things go. But unfortunately, the future is so bleak for so many millions of Mexicans in rural areas, predominantly. Not always rural, and there are plenty in more urban areas, that they're willing to take that risk. They're willing to gamble it all just for a little bit of sense of financial security. And it's that sad, it's that desperate, and it's really that real. So when El Chapo was caught by the U.S. authorities, or the Mexican authorities, I guess, and then handed over to the U.S. authorities, um, there was this power struggle that started, which had already been going on, to really be the gangland, the gang overlord, the supremo, the El Jefe, the Don, as they might say. It's funny that, on a side note, that we love American gangster movies in the U.S. We love movies like The Godfather and Goodfellas and Casino, and all these mafias that glamorize Italian and Irish gangsters, the Irishmen, and Jewish gangsters like Bugsy Siegel are forever immortalized as these folk heroes. But when we mention current Mexican gangsters, they are not accepted with the same reverence as our domestic thugs and criminals are revered with. And another prejudice that I've noticed, an undeserved prejudice, because gangsters are crooks, they are thieves, they are criminals, they are here to ruin your life. You do not want to get involved with their livelihood. And it's easy to love these movies and these folk heroes and the subculture and whatnot. And I certainly am a great admirer of gangster movies and such like that. But we have to be real, folks. It's the same thing across the border. But we as many Americans have great prejudice toward the Mexican gangsters, which are flooding our streets with narcotics and causing quite a lot of bad things to happen throughout our communities. So, before you point your finger at one, it's sometimes important to look at both sides or all angles. Now, the other thing I want to mention is, as far as we're talking about gangsters, is there are about 24 newspapers in the Mexico area that are posted every day. And if you look at them and you walk the streets, you'll see them hanging in newsstands. And it's no great secret. There's tons of fatalities. You'll see dead bodies in real close-up shots of mortal gunfire and stuff like that. It's pretty gruesome. And I guess they do it to show you really how bad these criminal actions are. But it's certainly a shock value. Hits you for some shock value. And the reason I mention this is because they don't always do follow-up stories in the same way. So you'll see that, for instance, when we first arrived into Mexico City a couple months ago, there was a horrible incident that took place in a drug rehab facility. I don't remember what state it was in. I'll have to do some research. Oh, it was in Guanajuato, I believe it was, which is an area that one of the two big enterprises that are struggling for criminal power of the power of the criminal underworld in Mexico, which they're fighting for over one of those areas. Anyway, I believe over 20 people were shot and killed, and it got put on the news. This is such a horrible thing. Innocent people who were trying to, help themselves in some medical facility, and they were ambushed. And well, it turns out that there's more to the story than we were told. And the more to the story part is that it's very common now because rehab facilities are somewhat off the grid. They're not. They're treated as such like as hospitals, so that um, you don't typically go in a hospital and start shooting up hospitals because there are a few of your uh, opposing uh, you know gang members on the floor number 4 or something like that. But in this case, most of the rehab facility was full of uh, a bunch of gangland fugitives, and this is not a unique situation. So whatever the story is, opposing gang members or revenged gang members went into this rehab facility, shot the place up, and they were killed. I think like 20 people. Of course, there's the chance of being caught in crossfire. Innocent people, get hit by shrapnel, and all sorts of bad things happen to innocent people. But if you are worried about safety, all right, things like mass shootings in public places are not happening in Mexico City like they happen throughout the United States of America. Um, People are not getting, kidnapped in these great uh, dramatic fashions that are being often glamorized in the media. People wake up in the morning, they have breakfast. I'm talking about locals throughout the country of Mexico. They have breakfast, they say goodbye to their wife or girlfriend, they go off to work, they come home, they have dinner, they play with their children the same way everyone does around the world. These things are not unique. It's not a cultural divide these are things that go on in every continent that I've ever visited, every country that I've ever been to. People wake up in the morning. They may be religious. They may not be religious. It does not matter. They want to wake up in the morning just as they did the day before. And I think that's an important point to make because I put these videos up and people's responses are, I think, in awe that life in Mexico is much like they would see in any city in the country that they live in. And I want to, um, I want to continue sending that message, particularly to people in the United States, because again, we are the neighboring country of Mexico. This is our neighbor to the south. I think a um, amicable relationship with that country is essential for everyone. Personally, I would love to see the day where people could travel freely between both countries, but that's probably not going to happen in my lifetime. Um, because there's this thought that every single 135 million Mexicans all want to live in Texas or in Arizona or in California. They don't want to be in the country of their homeland, and that is the furthest thing from the truth. There's an ever-growing expat community all throughout Mexico, in places like Mexico City, Puerto Vallarta, um, like Chapala. These are growing expat communities where people are seeing how great the quality of life is in Mexico for those, especially coming with the Yankee dollar, which goes quite far in Latin America, and especially right now, the Mexican peso I think is about 20 to 1, roughly 22 to 1, so 22 pesos to $1. Small taco in a nice neighborhood in Mexico City is about 12 pesos to 15 pesos. So, it's not uncommon for us to go out to a nice dinner and spend about $6 each. That's including it all. So your dollar goes a long way. Now, if you're going to some of these beach communities in Cabo San Lucas, and hotels can be very, very expensive, beachfront communities, but we often stay in inland a bit. We rent, like this house we rented in a very middle class, nice neighborhood, um, about a half a mile from the beach. We had a garage and 3 bedrooms, a private pool, and for a fraction of the cost, you can have something like that, or you can go stay on the beach for 3 nights and spend the same amount of money. That's not an exaggeration. Some of the places are going up on the coasts. The beaches in Cabo San Lucas are probably the nicest in Mexico. If some of the nicest in the country, or in the continent for that matter. Uh, Beautiful, beautiful white sandy beaches, warm water, very clear. So it's really gorgeous. This time of year, the water is exceedingly warm. It's about probably 84 degrees in the ocean right now. So if you're able to get down to Cabo San Lucas, now it is still storm season, so rainy season. It's not always beautiful and sunny out all day, but you'll get enough sunshine to make it well worth it. Um, while we were in Mexico City, it started to kind of become more open and more available. A lot of businesses are simply not going to reopen. That's the stark reality of it, and it's a sad reality to admit to. But I just don't know. How do you be in business and close for 6 months and then expect to reopen and resume? I'm glad I'm in not that position. I'm an unemployed union stagehand, sound engineer, but I'm glad I'm not a restaurant owner or something like that, because that seems so scary right now. And um, the nightclubs are not open. Restaurants and bars are still closing at 10 o'clock. So if you do serve food, basically the bars were allowed to open as long as they were serving food as well. So to kind of fit that legal ramification, bars were, making some simple tacos or pizzas or something like that. But they still were closing at 10 o'clock. So there's no real nightlife after 10 o'clock. I did hear some parties going on at our place every Friday. It must have been I'm guessing at least that it was an underground club of some sorts, because it went on till 4 or 5, even 6 o'clock in the morning on a couple of Fridays. And then it ended exactly at 6 o'clock. So it was like a it seemed far too precise and organized for it to be a random house party. I think it was a little more than that. But that was a rare exception. It was kind of odd because we went to a few downtown markets, like, for instance, Mercado Merced is the largest municipal market in Mexico City. It's very, very big. It goes on for blocks and blocks and blocks. Lots of produce and food and piñatas and quinceañera dresses and all sorts of stuff. But I guess certain businesses are allowed to be open, others were not. But it was funny because they had some lookout guy standing up on a chair, and when he thought the authorities were coming by, he would whistle, and everyone would shut their steel doors and pretend they were shuttered. So that was entertaining little piece of side bit kind of underground culture, street culture in that area. That area of Mexico City was far more, crowded and whatnot than where we were. So obviously that's, a reason why COVID really wreaked havoc on some of these poorer communities, because the accommodations are way more dense. The cleanliness is, while it was certainly, people were keeping their hands clean and putting masks on and stuff like that. Let's face it, once the rain comes, it starts washing all the garbage and street trash from one place to another, and the densely populated areas and the humble, let's say, structures which they have businesses and homes in were those that suffered the worst in the COVID crisis that we're still living in. Areas like Condesa, Roma, um, a lot of people were not there. It seemed like there were some part-time residences that were not being occupied. Those were maybe people, or they were, rental properties that weren't getting rented out anymore because people weren't traveling into Mexico City. But for the most part, you could see, people come home from work and they start going jogging and having their dog walks and stuff like that. So you can kind of get a feel for, who was living there. But it certainly didn't seem very crowded. It was kind of similar to where we live in the city that we live. So once you get familiar with the neighborhood, you can form a little barrier and keep create a safe little environment for yourself. We love Condesa. La Condesa is a great neighborhood in Mexico City, and if I did manage to convince anyone to go to Mexico City when you do start traveling, if it's next year or the year after, or whatever the case may be, I hope I did, because I think anyone who has ever thought about it, if there's that little interest in the back of your mind of I've always wondered what it was like there. I've heard such great things. My friends, my kids were there, and whatever it is. I hope I convinced at least one person out of the thousands that watched my videos. I hope I convinced at least one person to plan a trip to Mexico City. I um I don't want to uh I don't want to change anyone's mind and say, don't go here, don't do this, do this, do this, do what I say. But I do think that Mexico City is that important. It is so awesome, and if it, I think there is an unrational fear that lives in a lot of people's minds that they're not going to go because they heard they're going to get sick from the street food. They're going to get kidnapped. They're going to get robbed. They're going to all this is going to happen. I'll tell you the intensity from the uneasiness, the intensity is far greater in places like Puerto Vallarta, where you can't walk a half a block without people trying to sell you drugs or something that you don't want, timeshares, whatever the case may be. It gets really intense in tourist places like Puerto Vallarta, Cabo San Lucas. You want a glass bottom boat ride. Do you want to buy cocaine? Do you want to go for a jungle zip line tour? Do you want to rent a 4x4? Do you want to buy more cocaine? I mean, it doesn't end. If they think you have money and you're there as a tourist, they're very persistent in places like Cancun, Puerto Vallarta, Cabo San Lucas. Those are the three biggest beach destinations in Mexico right now. And I'm not going to say the police let it go on, but somebody's letting it go on because it's very, very, very much out in the open, and it gets really annoying. Okay. I'm not looking to buy cocaine. I'm not looking to buy a timeshare. I'm not looking for a flat bottom boat ride. I'm not looking for a jungle line zip tour. But if I am, I came, whatever, 2,000 miles to this destination. I have the internet and an iPhone. I'm savvy enough to figure out how to get any of those things. So, after about a day of people trying to get your attention, hey, buddy. And if you don't make eye contact and respond, they will continue to hit you with, hey, buddy, in several different languages. That I can tell you was not going to happen in places like La Condesa, Roma, and Mexico City, which is you will be living much as a local person. The real areas of Mexico. You want to really absorb Mexican culture and see how people live their lives in a foreign place. I would highly recommend, if you have any trepidation or apprehension about coming to Mexico City, rent an apartment or get a nice hotel in La Condesa or Roma or up on the Reforma, somewhere that you can be in a comfortable place and in a place that you like. I recommend renting an apartment because there's a lot of vacant rental apartments in La Condesa. It was hit by an earthquake about 2-3 years ago, and as a result of that, a lot of people left the area, which has kind of resulted in a in a surplus of rental properties. And we were able to take advantage of that. You can find a rental property in both of those communities, La Condesa and Roma, which they do border up against one another. And the area kind of would form, I'd say, about maybe 2.5 square mile area of town, which is plenty. That is a city unto itself. I promise you, it is. If you were just in Roma, if you were just in La Condesa or Reforma in this area of Mexico City, it is a city unto itself. Even if you come down for a week or 10 days, you will not have to leave that area and still be very fulfilled and feel like you had a very nice time and saw quite a lot of Mexico City. Where in reality, you've seen only a fraction of the city and you probably never even got on the metro. Um, Now, do you want to go down to places like Xochimilco or Tenichtitlan? All great options, but I get it. People and my first time in Mexico City, I was frightened out of my mind. They tell you that you're going to get robbed. I remember reading, I believe it was a Lonely Planet book even, that said, if you're going to be robbed in Mexico, it will likely happen to you in Mexico City. And I almost positive that's a accurate quote or a direct quote. And I'll have to go back at my older Lonely Planet books. I doubt it still says that in recent published guidebooks about Mexico City, but it definitely did. And this was in early 2000s. I first trip there I think was in 2004, and it was a very different place back then. They still had the VW bug uh, ta- uh, taxis, polluting the air. The old American school buses were chugging along. It caused this real bad combustion. Um, it was a smell that I've never encountered anywhere else in the world, other than I could just say it was a toxicity in the air that was very palpable, and it was something that made a real lasting impression on me. We stayed at the Four Seasons Hotel, a beautiful hotel on Reforma, right by Chapultepec Park, which I do recommend. A beautiful place if you're looking for a fancy hotel for your inaugural trip to Mexico City. It's a great place to base yourself out of if you got a little extra pesos in your pocket. But they told me, do not use a taxi from the airport. Let us hire you a private car. There's a receipt of where they picked you up and who you are, and the risk against kidnapping and all these precautions that were recommended I take. I believe it was a $30 car ride in 2004, which was, again, they get you a verified driver. And even the verified driver, I had such fear and anxiety in my stomach that I remember watching every corner she took and thinking, wow, she could just pull into this house and they can close their garage door and that would be the end of me. And I'm thinking, Jesus, why are these thoughts coming into my head? Millions and millions and millions of people arrive in Mexico City every year, and how many of them have these terrible things happen to them again? And how many millions of people arrive in New York City or in Los Angeles or Dallas, Texas, or Miami, Florida, or Chicago, Illinois, or any places that have a big populace, a large influence of organized crime? And needless to say, my $30 cab ride, it was very uneventful. It was a Brazilian woman, actually, who was driving me, and she couldn't have been nicer. And she spoke in English. My Spanish was still very rough back then, and we continued to use these private car services because we were recommended by everybody that taxis will rip you off, they'll kidnap you, blah 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 blah. Anyway, we finally, after about day 2, we saw so many people that were using taxis. We figured, wow, I think it might be okay to use a taxi. And I've been using taxis in Mexico ever since. I do know people who have been robbed by Mexican taxi drivers. I do know someone who was even kidnapped by an alleged Mexican taxi driver. And it was a very bad story. A good friend of mine, he was released. I will just be very honest and tell you the story. He was, I believe, picked up in a city called Puebla, which is a big city outside of Mexico City, very old Spanish colonial city. And the story that I remember him telling me is that he had, uh, I believe he had called an Uber, and guy pulled up, and he had thought a lot of Uber cars do look the same. Maybe it was a white 4-door car, but probably didn't check the license plate. Got into a car that was not his Uber, and that person was a crook, a criminal, a violent criminal. They were kidnapped against their will. I believe they put masks over their head. They couldn't tell where they were driving them. They took their ATM cards and took money out of their accounts. They were released, I think, after maybe even like an hour of this, them driving around Puebla and threatening them. And not a good story. Not a good story at all. And this guy is not a troublemaker. He's not a real tough guy in that respect, and he's not looking for trouble. He's a super nice guy, and not a frail guy either. He's about 6'6" and strong. Big, strong looking lad. Um, so that's certainly something that should be thought of. But these are not things that, again, that don't happen in the U.S. where people are. These are recurring crimes. Or people are getting into Uber or Lyft rides that are not theirs. They're caught off guard. And they end up in really bad situations. So, if you do use Uber, I'm not going to get into that debate whether or not you should or not. Always, always, always check the license plate. Make sure it matches the one that is intended for you. If you do use taxis, and I'm not going to tell you not to use a taxi in Mexico, taxi drivers around the world don't have a very good reputation. It's not an easy job, and unfortunately, there are a lot of unsavory people who might get into that line of work. I don't know that that's true or not, but taxi drivers have a bad reputation throughout the world as being unscrupulous. And these are risks we all take. Going out every day, you take a risk, um, and you have to be careful about what risks you take. And I would never risk my life, and I certainly wouldn't risk my wife's life, and get into a situation that I thought we could not get ourselves out of safely. Um, I have never felt that way in my life. I've never felt, hey, we're in this taxi and I really regret getting into this taxi. We should try to get out of this as soon as we possibly can. I've never felt like, oh, we checked into this hotel and this guy's really giving me the creeps. I don't feel safe here. We need to get out of here as soon as possible. I've never been in a country and ever felt any of those emotions. I was recently watching a very, very popular YouTube blogger or vlogger. His name is Ben. He doesn't, I don't know if he publicizes his last name, but his moniker that he goes by is Bold and Bankrupt. Really, really interesting guy from Brighton in England, to the city of Brighton on the southern coast of England. And he has a love of Eastern Europe, of Soviet countries that were governed by the Soviet Union in the 80s, and, when he grew up. And he has been spending the past decade or so traveling Eastern Europe, and in the last 4 or 5 years, documenting it on YouTube. And I highly recommend watching Bald and Bankrupt. That's BALD and Bankrupt. Like, you lost all your money in the stock market, bankrupt, Bald and Bankrupt. He's very, very, charming, kind of cockney lad, yeah. And he speaks Russian, which is a huge help because he can explain some things that I would certainly never be able to understand, since I do not speak Russian at all. He also goes throughout India. He speaks Hindi, so that's also an amazing experience watching him navigate places throughout India, Hindu speaking places in India. So he's a real interesting traveler, and he's got millions of viewers now on his Instagram, on his YouTube channel. So if you're into going to Eastern Europe or India, he's been to South America, all over the world, Africa. He was on this crazy train ride in Mauritania, through the deserts in Mauritania, and he's walked through dangerous, or allegedly dangerous, villages in Bolivia where drug criminals, are manufacturing cocaine in the jungles and stuff like that. And an interesting question he was recently hit with. He now lives in the Czech Republic, in Prague, and he was doing a radio interview, as his YouTube channel was doing very, very well. And one of the questions was, where's the most dangerous place you've ever been? And he didn't even hesitate to answer. And he says he's often quite given that question, and people naturally start to think that it was in Africa. But he says the only place that he has ever been in the world where he was afraid to film his videos and chose not to publish anything was in the US. He said certain areas, and I believe the cities that he referenced were Atlanta and Nashville, I think. He felt so unsafe and so out of his element, I think, that he just chose to pretty much abandon all um, plans to continue his filming. Um, there is a sense of insecurity that most Americans unknowingly live with. There aren't a lot of police that hang out in certain places, and the ones that he was saying um, were available. He sees armed with shotguns and people, there were civilians that were armed that he felt really off put by. And so these are things that people who have not traveled outside of the US, but probably don't even take into consideration. But those who live outside the US and are traveling to this country find very, very strange or foreign or unsettling. And so I thought that was a very interesting answer, especially considering it was coming from a person from England and not a fellow American who, we love the United States of America. We are very, very lucky to live here, and I will never state otherwise. But there are certain problems that we are enduring right now, especially in 2020, and has really been a systemic problem in this country for many, many decades before 2020. That when people speak poorly about the United States, they're deemed as anti-American or communist or whatever the case may be, and they throw these words out that I don't even know if they know what they mean. People call you name calling is about the dumbest way to insult somebody that exists. So you know, I certainly don't want to be misconstrued as making any anti-American sentiments. Although there's nothing wrong with criticizing and seeing problems that do exist and trying to make people aware that hey, life does not have to be this way. There are cultures in the world that are very similar to the United States, but live a little bit differently, and they have a different quality of life. They don't share the same quality of life issues that we share in this country. And that's interesting to see in going even to places we've been spending a lot of time in Europe and in Asia each summer. And because we cannot travel to Europe and Asia this summer, we chose to spend most of our summer in Mexico. And it's amazing to see the similarities between some areas of Mexico and areas of Europe. There's that old world culture that still prevails throughout many areas of Mexico that it makes you think you're in places like Italy or Spain or France. It's if you close your eyes and it's tough to even you know realize there's a difference. And it's very, very nice. It's right in our backyard. There's like a 5-hour flight from California instead of a 12-hour flight to Europe. And we've got this ancient culture, beautiful history, old architecture, the cobblestone streets, the all the old women doing wash by hand, or men doing wash by hand and hanging it in the laundry on the laundry lines, and things that are kind of lost to time in the U.S. that are still very, very prevalent and common south of the border in Mexico, down in Mexico way. Um, we are returning next month. We're flying down to probably catch a little bit of summer in Tulum or on the Quintana Roo coast. And we'd like to be back in Mexico City for the Day of the Dead, which will be a first for us. Anybody who has experienced the Day of the Dead celebration in Mexico, I'd love to hear a comment from anybody or some tips on where to go. I would really love to be, and we probably will go to Mexico City. But if anyone really has, hey, go to Puebla, Go to Merida, go to you, whatever you do, go to Oaxaca, or if anyone has some sort of like do not miss type of experience for the Day of the Dead weekend, which is over a weekend this year. I think the 31st is a Friday or Saturday, so it should be a good one. I don't know if they're going to reduce um, activities in any sort of way. You know, I doubt. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to expect really. I imagine it will be a bit different than it has been in the years past because of COVID, but I'm looking forward to checking it out. I will be reporting back here on YouTube on Gallivanting Man. I'm and trying to write. I haven't been writing much on Facebook as I used to because the videos are kind of taken over. It's a lot of work to put out those 5 or 10 minute videos. There's a lot of editing and proofing and all that stuff. And if in case you couldn't tell, I'm not a professional videographer, so I'm getting a little bit better at it, but still a long way to go. What else should we talk about? I have not seen many people commenting yet. So should we just keep on rapping, or should we wrap it up? You know, it was interesting. People talk about how great the food is throughout different areas of Mexico, and obviously there are 32 different states in Mexico. It's very regional and provincial, if you want to call it that, even. Um, And I guess the thing that people really think of, I don't know about it, I shouldn't say everyone, but maybe it was just me, is people envision street food, tacos and quesadillas and stuff like that. And I found it a little different when we were in Puerto Vallarta, which has a very good reputation for its culinary masterminds in that town. But the street food was not that great. It didn't hold a candle to what we had in Mexico City. So, it's you always got to adjust your expectations sometimes, I guess. However, the restaurants and stuff like that were outstanding. The food in Puerto Vallarta was very, very good. Overall, we had a great experience. Not really a town that I'm, headed back to immediately. We were there for 8 days. It was great. We had a nice time, but there's so many other areas of the country to explore, and for that reason, we will probably go somewhere, a different beach town this time around. Also, the water in Puerto Vallarta is a little off-putting. All those rivers kind of polluting the ocean right where you go swimming wasn't all that attractive, but cool town, and a big part of Mexican culture is in Puerto Vallarta. I made a video about how important it is that Puerto Vallarta exists because it really takes a lot of the culture that are and especially the gay culture, because don't forget Mexico is still uh, a very conservative Catholic country, and it has been since they since the Spaniards converted everybody, and it's I'm not part of the gay community, but I did have a nice long conversation with some fellows that were sharing our in our condo unit that we were at in the same building, and he said there's one of them was explaining that a very big gay community also in Guadalajara. There's another in Mexico City. It's still not all that common to see gay men or gay women walking, and having a lot of public displays of affection, stuff like that. And I live in San Francisco, where you know the gay culture has been very out in the open for many, many decades now. So it is becoming a little bit more prevalent in Puerto Vallarta. But when I asked this, I think he was 36 years old, my friend Christian, and he said he thinks his parents know that he's gay, but he can't be too certain. He certainly never had the conversation to make them know that he is gay, and then he had boyfriends and such. To that respect, he was still very clandestine. It was that kind of Fire Island vibe where they his Canadian boyfriend meets him in Puerto Vallarta, and he takes a weekend off and drives from his parents' house where he still lives with his parents. He's a middle class, got a master's degree, works for a bank, but still that old world kind of culture. He lives with his parents until he gets married, or And so I thought that was interesting. Baby steps for a lot of places, and I've read about the conservative nature of Mexican culture. Up until recent times, they the church is very, very revered, and it once governed the laws of the land and owned the property, and it wasn't really until a couple hundred years ago then that changed, and it doesn't you can see even 200 years there is still there's still room that they still have the places to continue to improve, and it's still we're still not all the way there for equal rights, and for that nature people who are living on the fringes of society live still in fear of not being treated equal or respectfully, and so Puerto Vallarta is certainly what they once might call a safe haven, if there's such a thing, because communists from the 50s who were victimized by fascism and McCarthyism and the conservative American mindset that was really um, ruining people's lives financially, spiritually, culturally, all the whole bit. It was a tough time. If that's what people want to bring back, then we have some trouble times ahead, because those were not good times culturally speaking, and I hope we do not you know we don't move backwards as a society, because that would not be a good way to go. All right, we're been going on for about an hour and 6 minutes of me just spewing information about Mexico. Was it safe? Is it safe? Do I ever want to go back? How's my digestion? The water thing varies from place to place. We try to drink filtered bottled water. I was drinking tap water in Mexico City. It's triple filtered by the homeowner of the apartment that we rented. Did not get sick. I don't think I've ever really been sick from drinking the water in Mexico, now that I think about it. I don't think so. The only time I really remember getting very ill from something that I ate was in Honduras. And that was something I will not forget. Eating street food is, we were in India earlier this year in January. My wife and I were in India for 3 weeks. And I think there are two countries in the world that people, it used to be Colombia. If you ever told people you're going to Colombia, they were convinced you're either a drug dealer or you're so crazy that you'll never come back alive. And Colombia is now I've never been there, but I have many friends who travel to Colombia and returned safely. It's one of a beautiful country, and I look forward to going there one day. But two other places that people put the worst fear in the world in you are India and Mexico. If you go to India, you will definitely come back with some sort of parasite or stomach problem. I don't consider myself particularly lucky. I think I'm pretty careful. I think I am somewhat smart sometimes, and I careful what put in your body. Look to see other people eating that food. Are they finishing all of their plate? Are they finishing their whole serving? Are they sending it back because it was too cold, or was not that great, or looked like it was been cooking in the sun all day and not fresh? None of these should be things that you eat. If you walk up to a cart and it looks like the food that you're looking at has literally been cooking in a Tupperware tray for 6 hours, don't eat it. Don't even question it. There are other places that are doing constant business. There's probably a line of people or a constant stream of people, and because of that, the food is not lingering in the heat or in the open elements for long periods of time. And these are really simple ways of avoiding some bad decisions about what you put in your body. Now, accidents happen. People's hands are maybe not. Maybe your hands are not clean, and then you touch a cup that you drink from. These are ways that you can get food poisoning. Now, it's not really food poisoning. You're having a bad reaction to some bacteria, something that got into your body. But actual food poisoning is a very, very dangerous situation. You're poisoned. It could go into your blood. It could, you could get toxic shock. It's not something that it just goes away in a couple hours. Actual real toxic food poisoning is a dangerous, dangerous situation. Now, having a bad reaction for something that wasn't particularly clean, probably not as dangerous, maybe equally as uncomfortable for a bit of time, but not life threatening. And food poisoning could be life threatening for those, especially with certain allergies. Um, and so, like I said, many times this is the way that a lot of working class people eat. Um, they will, they will patronize the same street food purveyor, for breakfast, for lunch, maybe even breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you'll see repeat customers. They recognize one another. They're part of the community. They're not trying to get these people sick. This is their livelihood. They can't risk any sanitary issues and getting people sick. And those who prepare food, even on a very humble level, are aware of this. They need to be aware of this if they're not. And it's pretty clear if they're not. You don't when you walk these streets of Mexico City, which you may or may not think are clean, and they're certainly cleaner than the streets of San Francisco and other cities that I visited in the United States. In the nicer neighborhoods in Mexico City that we were staying in, these street cart vendors are I'm not going to say they're sterile, but they're certainly as clean as any restaurant that I would visit. And because of that, I think we've got a pretty good track record eating street food around the world. In the last year, in 2020, I've been to India, I've been to Taiwan, we've been to Thailand and Bangkok for a few days. We've been in Mexico for over 2 months now. And other than a little upset stomach, and well, I did get sick for some bad orange juice, but that was neither here nor there. But no street food cook, chef, purveyor, whatever you want to call it, has been responsible for any sort of digestive or health issues that I've had or my wife's has had. So these are simple precautions. Again, if you're thinking about eating street food, that is food that is not attached to a kitchen, often with running water or electricity. These are people, humble, working class people who set up carts selling tacos, quesadillas, hot dogs, hamburgers, uh, sandwiches, tortas, just about everything imaginable is soups. One of the greatest things in the world, especially in the morning, for if it's a little chilly in the morning, Mexico City, have a nice big or medium sized bowl of chicken soup with some rice in it. It is so satisfying. But what I do again, and step back for if you are, unless you're relying upon some social media or some I keep scratching my nose. I'm sorry. That's really rude and pretty ugly to watch. But unless you know of the place that you're eating, you do some research and it's some hot thing that's on a food blog or someone recommended to you, don't miss Donna Maria's tamales or something like that, or whatever the case may be. And if you're unaware of it, you're hungry, you're walking around some Zocalo in Mexico City and you see there's a taco guy here, there's one here, there's one here, there's one here. How do you choose which one to go to? Because they may be all serving the same thing. They may not. They may all have, tacos with similar ingredients. They may all have tortas, similar kind of setups and similar items being served. So, how do you make the decision about which one to go to? Do you flip a coin? Do you close your eyes and pick? Do you let someone else do the? Do you ask someone else? Where do you go? How do you make the decision? Well, I'll tell you. It's usually the case that you'll notice one or more is a little bit busier than the rest. And why is that? Why is it that this place is constantly busier than the ones next to them? Well, I'm not going to tell you that it is better because food is very subjective. And what I think is better, you might think has been a total waste of money and certainly not better. But I will say that um, people gravitate toward good food, and word travels pretty quickly. And you, as a traveler, probably don't recognize this, but these food cart stands may have been there for 10, 20. I was at a place in Mexico City and I asked her how long the stand had been there, and she told me 36 years. So these are not impromptu little places that move around from place to place wherever they have enough room and someone says that if they pay the right person, they can set up their food cart there. These are pretty um, identifiable locations. The locals, they rely upon these people. You know, they're on their way to work. They might not. They might live in a big house with lots of people, and it's just easier to grab a dollar taco or quesadilla on their way to work or their way home from work or during lunch, whatever the reason may be. And I can think of in my mind a few places that I really have fond memories of, but you'll notice that they're very busier, very much busier. They're a lot busier than their counterparts, which is no great mystery. And again, I'm just going to tell you that people gravitate toward things that taste good. And, I step back, I watch how many tacos do people order. Are they ordering one, taking a bite, and then throwing the rest away? Are they ordering one of everything and devouring all of it and taking some home? Are they ordering just enough and then finishing their plate for lunch and then, returning an empty plate? That's the one that I'm after. I want the person who ordered uh, enough of variety where I can tell they're not just having a little, they're not picking just a little taste to see if they like it. They know the place that they're going to. They identify more than one item that they eat. They eat all of it. They look satisfied. They have a smile on their face, and that is a good way to vet street food and street food vendors. Are they? People aren't usually too enthusiastic about risking. On a 30-minute lunch break, should I try someplace new and hope that I like it and hope that it's healthy food? Probably not what they're going to do for their midday meal and then return back to work and hope it doesn't upset their stomach or digestive process. So we love the street food in Mexico. We have had nothing but success eating street food in places like Oaxaca, Mexico City, and all over the southern Baja. Again, much like my friend who had trouble in an Uber ride in Puebla, I certainly do know people who had very bad experiences eating street food in Mexico City. A lot of food I will try. I'm pretty adventurous with my palate, but a lot of the food just doesn't translate over culture. It doesn't look appetizing enough to me. I don't eat tripe. I don't eat brains. I don't do some of that stuff that is very popular in. Ah, can't I make that one big itch? Can't get behind some of those more exotic delicacies that certain cultures love. I've eaten tons of crickets. Uh, Tons of ants in southern Mexico. They're delicious. I will eat them again, but some of the organ stuff I just don't enjoy. I'm not willing to experiment with. So, um, you know, survey the foods. Look to see what you like. Don't be afraid to stick with vegetarian items because you're unsure. If you are unsure, telling people I'm vegetarian, they will kind of scale back some of the uh, more exotic meats you're maybe not familiar with, maybe less comfortable eating. I don't know how adventurous people's palates are, but cultures are different from state to state. Like I said, there's 32 states in Mexico, and that's just not to put up indiscriminate borders. It's because that culturally they're different places and people are different. There's areas of states in areas like northern Jalisco where there was a bunch of 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 French influence, and people have very light skinned features, and you when you look at them, you think you'd look very Parisian even. But that's Mexico for you. It is a culturally diverse, another no scratch, um, area of the world. And I'm going to wrap it up by saying Viva la Mexico. I'm going to do some more videos. So when we head back to, I'm just going to wrap it up. I'm not going to post this. Goodbye, everybody.